What actually makes a great photo? At its core, there are three pillars that every great photo is built on. And today we're going to break them down so you can apply them anywhere, no matter what you're photographing or where you are in the world. The three pillars of a great photo are composition, lighting, and story. If you can nail all three, you can make great images anywhere. And we're going to go through them one by one to talk about how exactly to do that. The first pillar is composition. It's all about how you arrange what's in front of you. Notice there's no epic vistas or futuristic cities on that list. Those things are nice to have, don't get me wrong. I love an epic landscape as much as the next photographer. It certainly makes it a little easier when your subject is inherently photogenic, but you don't need that to make great photos. Even a plain subject can look interesting if it's framed in an interesting way. When you're approaching a scene for the first time, or if you're looking at your past photos, ask yourself some of these questions. Am I showing my subject in a dynamic way? Or is it the most obvious framing? Can I use a lower angle? Or a higher angle? A tilted angle? Can I make use of negative space? That's like empty space of sky or environment that creates this more minimal feel. Can I make use of scale, showing how big something is next to something else? Or can I get super close up on my subject and focus on things like shapes, color, and texture rather than the bigger scene? I also want to consider if I'm showing my subject with depth. Does my image have layers to it? A foreground, midground, and background? Am I using compositional tools like leading lines or framing to direct attention? I can also ask, what secondary element can I add to this frame to make it more interesting? The key here is that a boring subject looks less boring when arranged thoughtfully and presented in an interesting way. In my experience, if you look hard enough, there are interesting things to photograph around you. You just have to find them. And then as a photographer, figure out how to capture it in a way that's unique. See if there's a way you can show it that's different from how most people would look at it with their eyes. Start by getting the most obvious composition out of the way, but then experiment and try to look at it from a different angle that's not the obvious choice. Next, you need to think about light. Light is what completely changes everyday scenes. What feels ordinary at noon can become cinematic at sunset. In this category of light, we're also going to include weather because that is, of course, an important factor. If I'm shooting kind of everyday subject matter, I want to be shooting it in light that complements it, or in interesting weather. If you don't have much control over interesting subjects to photograph, then come at the plain ones with super cool compositions and light. We want to focus most on what's within our control, and as photographers, that's composition and lighting. Which means I want to be out photographing in interesting conditions. At golden hour, sunset, blue hour, just after sunset, at night, if it's safe to do so, or in weather other than perfectly clear, like fog or rain. Showing your subject in lighting conditions most people never notice or get to see it in is inherently going to make it more interesting, because you're showing this scene in a way that a lot of people just won't see it in because they're in their homes, but you're out with your camera. Lighting can take any ordinary object and make it stand out. There are photographers that get paid to create advertising images for packets of bread or ketchup. How do they make those things stand out? With lighting. Lighting can add mood to an everyday scene. It can make something most people think is ugly look like a scene from a movie. A dramatic sky can make your subject jump out if you expose it to create contrast by looking for things like silhouettes or pockets of light. The takeaway here is that good light or dramatic weather can make any subject feel more intentional and alive, so focus most on what's within your control. And finally, we get to story. This is the piece that gives your photos emotion. A photo is memorable when it creates a feeling, and your goal is to try and capture a moment and create mood and atmosphere. From a story standpoint, if I can include some sort of context, like a small person in an open space, a house, or even birds in the sky, animals of some kind, I can instantly make a photo feel more alive. You can make a kind of plain landscape a lot more interesting by capturing a person in motion or some kind of moment happening in it. When it comes to atmosphere, I want to bring out a vibe in the image by focusing on things like color, warm versus cool, vibrant versus desaturated, and doing things with exposure, like leaning into a scene being darker, embracing the shadows, This is what creates atmosphere. And I also want to touch on mood, which is kind of similar to atmosphere. But I want to ask, how should this scene feel? Is it peaceful, ethereal, or eerie, or cinematic? And then go back to those things like light and color to bring out certain emotions. And as a bonus, I want to highlight the importance of venturing out of your surroundings as well. And that doesn't have to mean getting on a plane and going to another country. I mean visiting somewhere new, an hour away, 2 hours away, a day trip, if you will. Because you really don't know what else is out there until you start looking for it. I do day trips all the time when I travel to new places, but for some reason, it took me forever to connect the dots and just start doing the same at home. I've made it a practice this year to try and visit more new places around my area, and it's produced some of my favorite images yet. You saw a lot of them in this video. If you're not sure how to even find places to day trip to, go into ChatGPT and type, "Give me a list of the 10 most photogenic destinations within a 1 or 2 hour drive of insert your hometown for insert what you like to photograph. Landscape, street, architecture, whatever." I'll open up the town or place on Google Maps and tap around on the point of interest bubbles until I see something interesting. And remember, what might not look that interesting in daytime lighting on Google Maps can look a lot cooler at golden hour. So anything that catches your eye is probably worth checking out. Then I'll save those points to a list and put them together into a walking route. And there's always more interesting stuff in the area than what I initially found in maps. This method has never let me down. So whether you're in a world-famous location or your quiet hometown, ultimately it's how you make use of those 3 pillars of a great photo: composition, lighting, and story that are going to make the biggest difference in making great images. If you found this useful, you'll love this video all about how to create depth with lighting. I also have videos on creating depth with composition and storytelling in photography, linked in the description down below. Subscribe if you haven't already to make sure you get the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.